Hey everyone, this is Meyer, and what I'm going to be doing in this video is sort of giving you my uncensored opinion on the Supersaws of various synthesizers. There are going to be 30 synthesizers I want to go through. I kind of tried to pick a good mix of older synths, newer synths. Pretty much all of these are currently available. And what we're going to be doing is kind of going through them. I'll give you my comments on the sound. I'll tell you which ones I use, which ones I like, and why. I also have this Spectrum Analyzer Span, which is free. We're going to be using this to look at the character of some of these, look at some of the aliasing, look at other things. So the way I have this set up right now is what you'll end up seeing is when I play a sound, there's two graphs. There's a top and a bottom one. One is slower and one is faster. And what this will allow us to do when it's doing the Fourier transforms is we can actually see some of the phasing and the aliasing. It's nice to just have these two plots going on at once. So that's what we will be doing. We'll be going through all of these kind of in alphabetical order. I'll tell you which ones are my favorite. The other thing to note is I have them all routed to this insert bus, which has an Arts Acoustic Reverb with my favorite preset. This is a preset from the Temple One Bank. You can find that on Freshly Squeezed Samples, a Fruity Delay, the SSL bus compressor, which is awesome, and then possibly an LFO tool if we want to test that. So this will give it more context because otherwise it's just going to be really dry. And I can turn them on here. So you hear a little bit more what it would sound like in sort of a mix. So there's not going to be any EQ, and we'll just be going through. Now, the difficulty is some of these synths are more powerful than others. And the reason this is difficult is some of these synths, it'll be harder to dial in a good sounding sound. So it may have a lot of different options, but a lot of those options are bad. So I'll try to mention that when we're going through these. None of these synth developers have paid me to say anything good or bad, and I'm going to be completely uncensored. I'm going to tell you what I like, what I don't like. None of these synths I regret buying. None of the ones I list here. They're all pretty solid, and they all have their pluses and minuses. Some of these are free, some of these are paid, some of these I paid a lot of money for. So let's just go ahead and get started. So first one here on the list is going to be Sonic Academy Anna 2. I'm going to be using a basic saw waveform, and I'll be starting these off pretty much testing it with 7 voices because that's the standard JP8000 or 8080 Supersaw. Then we'll try it maybe with 9 voices. I will also at another point be doing the hardware that I have, like the JP8000 or 8080, the actual hardware, and the Virus TI2. But one thing to note, and there's a lot of BS around, these are both digital synthesizers, which means in theory, all of this stuff could be replicated exactly with software. So when people tell you, oh, the hardware sounds better, yeah, it's just the algorithm that's different. That there's nothing analog about it, like an analog synthesizer. So keep that in mind. Like I said, people like hardware just because it's hardware, but that doesn't mean it necessarily sounds better or necessarily any different. You could emulate any digital synth in software just the same, and there are emulations of some of the older viruses you can find that emulate that DSP chip, and that's why they're probably going to be sample accurate. So enough about that. Let's go ahead and get started. So that's this one. Let's go ahead and bump up the voices to 7. Let's get span so we can see this. Hopefully I can get this. Oh, it is detached. Okay, good. So we'll just keep that up on top. Notice how as I'm moving this detune, I would say this actually sounds pretty good. This width controls how wide the saws are. So this would be your standard JP kind of sound. And then the width spreads it out. What I'm really listening for is that sort of phasing sound. I think that sounds really good. If you were going to want to make a lead out of this, what I tend to do is take the amplitude, sustain, and decay down and bring up the release a little bit. And then maybe I wouldn't choose the analog type of envelope. Maybe do something like this. That actually sounds pretty good. So that's what I would use. I would not feel bad using Sonic Academy Anna for leads or any sort of Supersaw kinds of sounds. So that's great. I'll have a link to the project here too, so all of you guys can see this. Let's move on over to Ascension. This is by, I believe, DMS. Let's see. Cubic Audio, but it's sold through either Dance MIDI samples or something else. I think you can get it on sale. One thing to notice, a lot of these waveforms, you can see based on the filter where it cuts off. What I'm looking for is this full spectrum? Is this going up all the way to 20K? Now, some people can't hear it, but if it cuts off, and there are a few synths that'll cut off around 16K and there's nothing you can do about it. So you miss sometimes some of that brightness. So be aware of this. This one, it looks like it's cutting off, but that's because we have these filters. Now, the problem here is we can't actually turn this off. You could use the resonance a little bit. So that's something to be aware of. It's not going to be the brightest. So let's go ahead and go to the Unison page. We'll start with 7 voices. Now, for some reason, there's something about this that I'm not as much of a fan of, and I'm not really sure why. It could be the way this is re-triggering. So pretty much when you're building Supersaws, you want to increase the detune. It's helpful if you have the option to do stereo. To do it, keep in mind the 2 Supersaws that people are emulating are the JP8000 and the Virus Supersaw, or Hypersaw. Virus called it the Hypersaw. The JP was the original one, called it the Supersaw. The JP has 7 voices. The Virus has up to 9, but you can actually control it with the Virus. So the Virus one actually did allow some stereo spreading. The JP did not. It was mono. So some of these synths try to do it in different ways. Oh, good, you can adjust the curve here. It's usually nicer to have a curve like this for the release. Oh, and you can change the mode here too. That's kind of helpful. I don't like this tight mode. Let's try linear. This hyper mode is the best, and it's actually not too bad. Once again, if you were to try to make this kind of a lead. Now that sounds good. So this is one, it just took some time to dial it in, but I think once you get it here, I'm not hearing any of the weird artifacts I don't like hearing. There you can hear it a little bit. But once you get it up, it actually sounds pretty good. So I'll just leave that there. Yeah, if you have any of these plugins, it'll work for the ones that you do. So that is Ascension. Not altogether bad. I'm not going to be like giving these a ranking or a number. It just takes some time to dial in, so be aware of that. Moving on to Avenger 2. This is by the Vengeance Sound people. Let's go ahead and take a listen. I'm going to set the voices up here to 7. I'm just going to leave this the way it is. Check out the span. That's just beautiful. That is just beautiful right there. There are a few points where it phases, but I actually think it sounds pretty authentic to the JP. This only lets you go up to 7, doesn't let you go up to 9. So let's go ahead and check on this amplitude envelope. Let's give it a little bit of release. I think if you use, yeah, you can right click. Oh, that's really nice. There are just a lot of sweet spots. I mean, this just sounds really good. I mean, it just, to me, it just sounds excellent. Let's see, is that on the right channel? It should be. Oh, the problem is I don't have the velocities all the same. That's why it's triggering them differently. Let's try just... And with the effects on. Now, one thing to realize on the JP, what they do is they actually, it's like high passed a little bit. So it would be like taking, this is the first harmonic. We'd be doing something like this. Yeah, I think that just sounds really good. I mean, yeah, to me, it's just easy to dial that in. Now we're going to move on to an interesting synth. This is the CHRO8080. It's a reactor ensemble made by a company called Pulsecraft. It's actually going to be, you can buy it now. You have to basically DM this guy on WhatsApp. He's this guy in Germany. And I just kind of took a risk. I had heard people talking about it online. And this is an emulation of the JP8080, although it has a bunch of other extra features. But I think this will be getting an actual full release as well. So this is the version that I have. He'll actually send you your own copy. So this is one that's like licensed to me. It's a beta version. Oh, let's turn this off. So like the JP8080, we're going to set this to Supersaw mode. This is what you would do. Make sure we're only on first oscillator. Oops. So notice how this is in mono. It may not sound as good to you because you're not hearing that stereo field, but that's just the way that it is. Actually, to me, it sounds pretty authentic, reasonably good. The JP8080 has these EQs, which are pretty aggressive, actually. Yeah, that's actually pretty much what the hardware is like. You know, you could really dial it in. It really helps. Now, on the JP8080, you can actually double this up. I don't know if you can do that in here. I've been looking around for it, and I can't find... Oh, here we go. So what you could do to get that stereo field is to bump up the unison down here. This is the overall voice unison. Look at it span. Yeah, this sounds really good to me. I mean, this really does sound pretty darn good. But you got to have this. You can even do, I mean, this is just complete overkill. Let's just, I think if you're trying to get this unison, you use Supersaw with just two voices. That way you get that stereo spread, but it's not too much. This is phase retriggering. We usually want that off, although it doesn't really matter with this Supersaw waveform. With some synths like Silent, that'll matter. And let's see, we can just dial in a kind of a basic Supersaw lead kind of sound. See, notice how easy it is to get that sound with this. This is why people love the JP8080. There's a huge hole. No one's really done an emulation. And then the people at Roland, they have this Roland Cloud, and they haven't done this. This would be so easy for them to release an official JP8080. They just haven't done it. So luckily, this guy over here in Germany has done it, and hopefully Arturia will also do it, and maybe Behringer. You know, Ulio, if you're watching this, you know, be quick, make a hardware new version of the JP. We're all waiting for it, at least most of us. It's nostalgia. So this saw is actually pretty dark, so it helps to boost this. So I've turned the filter off. It's just nice. There's no phasing. There's no weird artifacts. It just kind of works right off the gate. So I'm a big fan of this. Check out the CHRO 8080. I'll put a link in the description to all of these so you can try it out. It is a little more stringent on the CPU than some of these. It's not terrible, but this is an old ancient computer, 10 years old. And one instance runs about 20%, but you can multi-thread it. So if you can run, it's not that you can only run 5. I could probably run a lot more, but just be aware of that. Now we're going to move on to Diva. Now the way Diva works is... Oh, let's turn this stuff off. We want to change this oscillator to the digital oscillator. This is going to emulate the JP. So let's make sure we're mixed all the way to just oscillator 1. You can also, I think you can choose it on both oscillators, which is kind of nice. And let's just put this to Divine. Actually not really killing my CPU. I thought it would. This is okay. I know this is usually different feedback oscillators. Now you can actually go in here and detune the individual voices, which is kind of crazy. The thing with the Diva, I would say, is it sounds really good, but you need to take some time to dial it in. But if you get the right presets, or if you make it yourself, it's going to sound really good. So let's turn this to the digital, the cascade filter. Yeah, I don't know why it just needed that boost. Maybe that the ladder filter was just for some reason. Yeah, that sounds a lot better. Once again, what I'm listening for is that phasing. Yeah, this is good. I mean, it's overall a pretty balanced sound. If I find let's just take this, this is like the JP. Whoa. And let's put on some of the reverb and delay. Oops, wrong synth. I mean, it really does kind of sound like hardware. Like, it's kind of warm. It's different. I mean, Diva's a very different sound. I mean, let me know in the comments what you guys think. I don't want you guys just to agree with me. If there are ones you like better, like, let me know. This is fascinating to me. The other thing we can do is just stack these voices. But I don't know, well, tune... Well, I don't know to the extent we can actually stereo pan it. I'm not sure about that. There are ways you could probably do this, but I'm not 100% sure how to do it. Now, it's funny, I like the sound of Diva, but I don't usually go to it when I'm looking for Supersaw sound. And part of it is I like that immediacy of having the stereo spread available. Even though I think Diva does sound very good, and a lot of people use it. I've used some great presets from it. I just don't immediately go to programming with it for that reason. So let's go over to Diversion. This is by this guy Dimitri online. Great synth. I got this when it originally came out. This is probably more than 10 years ago. Now, this doesn't have per-oscillator Unison. I thought it did at the time, but you can set detune up here. Now, I'm not a big fan of when that happens. I don't like using synths where you don't have per-oscillator Unison for leads, but let's just try it. I mean, I like this synth a lot. I think it's really powerful. It's a very bright sound by default. Let's see if we can find just a standard saw that's not as bright, so we're comparing apples to apples here. This might be... Oh, there we go. Basic saw. That's good. Now, this synth is really, really bright. Notice it's full-bodied, everything up there. You get all of the harmonics, even more. It's probably because I set this is set to bright. But if I do normal, yeah, there it is. And let's go ahead and bump up the Unison here. Let's start with 7 voices. And the stereo. But look at this, that's interesting. Yeah, I think this sounds really good. I just wouldn't really use this for leads. I think the CPU usage it's not the highest, but it's not the lowest either, from what I can tell. I think it was higher, when it came out, and that's what people used. But now it's, not all that crazy. And if I can find where the amplitude envelope is, which I've just totally forgotten. Yeah, here it is. Okay. I don't like what I did here. I'm just so lazy. I'm so used to just being able to see the envelope. I'm like trying to program it in here, and I have like no idea. It gives a percent, not milliseconds. Yeah, so I really like Diversion, but I wouldn't use it for leads. One thing, look at the CPU meter. I mean, I just had an underrun with all those voices. And the other reason is just simply because it takes a little bit more to program and you don't have that per-oscillator Unison. But it sounds great. I would encourage you guys to check out this synth and use it. It's a very flexible synth. It has a lot of great features. It's definitely worth your time. It's just not what I would be my first choice for leads for programming reasons. Moving on to Dune. This is Dune 3 by Synapse Audio. This is one of my favorite synths. It's like very similar to the Virus. It's probably as close as you can get in terms of architecture to the Virus without too many extra bells and whistles and too fewer. The one thing I'm not the biggest fan of is the mod matrix. It still has the old school mod matrix, but it's really good. So the way we get Unison on here, we're gonna do one oscillator. So I'm turning off all the other ones, and we're gonna just bump this up to 7. Oh, let's turn that off. Sometimes I like it and sometimes I don't. You can hear that phasing. I think it works better more detuned, but in these more tight stacks, you can kind of see it. But the stereo spread does help. One thing to note, this can go all the way up to 32 voices. That actually sounds better. Wow. And this isn't hurting my CPU at all. I mean, you can do crazy stuff with this. There is a point you get diminishing returns. Now, one of the things I like here on Dune is you get these other modes. I really like the non-linear mode for some reason. I think that's a similar tuning to maybe the JP. Adam Sabo has a paper about that. He wrote the code for JP6K and the Viper, which is a emulation of the virus. He's like an expert when it comes to Supersaws. Unfortunately, those are not available on Mac, so I can't use it. But if you're on Windows, check out his plugins. JP6K is great. His other plugins are great. He really knows what he's doing. I used to use JP6K when I was on Windows, and I really liked it. I just can't use it anymore. Hopefully SynthEdit will come in on Windows. Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, it's just, I'd say this is medium difficulty dialing it in, but you do get a lot of different options. You also have this Gaussian mode, which it kind of rolls off the outer edges. So it's a little bit different. I play around with it. Then there's a swarm mode, which they created to kind of emulate the Supersaw, but I really don't like it. I don't know, it just sounds a little too harsh to me. I think it would be cool for like harder sounding leads. It's just when I saw they announced this was probably back, years ago. When they announced the Swarm, I'm like, oh, this will be cool. It'll be like the Supersaw. And then I tried it and I was like, I like the other one better. I mean, it's good. I mean, the other ones are fine, so it's pretty good. The other thing you can do with Dune that's pretty crazy, you can actually duplicate each of these voices. So, you can have 32 voices and you can duplicate it over here. So this is 2x8. Yeah, I think it sounds really good. So definitely check out Dune. I don't use it for leads that much. Sometimes. But I'll show you the ones I normally go to. Now we're going to move on to Tone 2 Electra. This is from German developer in Tone 2. I just recently updated this to version 3 for this video. And the way we do this on here is we're going to switch this from Wavetable to Hypersaw. Now there's a bunch of different modes, so you got to be careful of which one you choose. Let's see, Hypersaw, you got the virus and you got the JP. So let's start with the JP. This will be 7 voices, and use this pulse width to do the detuning. So let's go ahead and get our spectrum analyzer here. Where'd it go? There you go. No stereo, but that's to be expected. Wow. That sounds great. Holy moly. I don't remember it sounding that good. Let's turn on that reverb. Has a very kind of old school, it sounds older, but that's the JP. I mean, that is, wow. And then you got the Hypersaw from the viruses. I'm surprised. I'm really surprised these Hypersaws don't have stereo. I wonder why that is. Wouldn't be that. Some of Tone 2's other synths do it, and that's what I think is really strange. But, of course, you could just have multiple oscillators. You can do all sorts of... You could do 2 different parts and copy it over that way. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. This is also very similar to the virus as well. So it's just odd that you don't get that stereo. But maybe that's what you want. So this super noise also Pretty good. It's like Hypersaw with or Supersaw with some noise in it. Really good. I think I prefer the Virus one on here. But that's what you get, and yeah, it's good. I'll tell you, it's good. It's really, really good. Wow. I was not expecting that. Let's move on to Hive. This is by Yuhi, who also does Zebra, which we'll look at later. This was meant to be a kind of like a version of Silent, like a Silent killer, and it definitely has more features than Silent, but it's a little more heavy on CPU, so I just don't really use it that much, even though it's great. And there's some great presets. I think this is one of those synths that just does everything well. Go ahead and open up Span. And let's go ahead and turn this filter off as well. So now for whatever reason, we're not getting the full spectrum, and I'm not sure why that is. The effects should all be off. Maybe it's because maybe I have it on some mode here. I'm wondering, I'm just looking to see if I have it on some mode where it needs to be on like a higher quality mode. If it's just not emulating these higher frequencies for whatever reason. So you get wavetables. I'm just not seeing it here. Not seeing any sort of like quality control. We got the engine settings. Nope, wouldn't be there. Preferences. Maybe that's just what you get. That is odd though that we're not getting. And of course you want to have this reset, otherwise you get that ugliness. So to be honest, and I don't know, maybe it's the number of voices. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's up there. I do like it. I do like it quite a bit. I am still finding it weird that it's not just all the way up here. There's no oversampling, nothing like that. So, odd. Okay, well, cool. That's interesting. Thought there was like a bright mode, but you know what? And I'm using an older version of this, so maybe the other versions have that. Anyway, let's move on. UVI Falcon. This is like a synth workstation from UVI. There are two ways to do it because it's so powerful. I've routed this already. There's the analog mode, where we can just bump it up this way. To be honest, this is not my favorite. I'm not the biggest fan. Oh, that's better. It sounds like it has these artifacts in there. I don't know if you hear what I'm hearing. That's turning on the stereo spread. Yeah, it doesn't do all that much for me. This would not be what I work for. To do Supersaws, to be honest. It would not be what I work for. Now, I think that's probably overkill for what Falcon is. Falcon's incredibly complex. There's so much you can do with it. But it's just, for whatever reason, there's just not really a, it's not meant to really just do this particular thing. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm sure there are fans here who are like, oh, you're doing it wrong and stuff. And if so, I apologize. Moving on, this is Air Music Tech Hybrid. This will often go on sale on Plugin Boutique and other places for like a couple dollars. So keep that in mind. Nice full-bodied saw. Let's go to this multi-wave. Wow, that is pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and... that's annoying. Do you really have to click and drag each of these individually? I want the filter probably off. Is there a way to do this? Digital. I don't want to do anything in terms of let's turn on this stuff. I mean, it sounds really good. I think this sounds pretty good. It doesn't have that stereo spread per oscillator, at least not from what I can tell, which is a little disappointing, but this is an older synth, but it sounds really good. I mean, I would totally use this. This is like, I would put this in a similar category to the Novation V Station. Maybe the V Station sounds a little better, but you don't get a per oscillator unison in V Station like you do with this. Moving on to Icarus, criminally underrated wavetable synth. This is another one from Tone 2. They're going to be releasing version 3 soon. First of all, full-bodied saw waveform. Let's go over here and choose. Got different options. We got Hypersaw and Stereo Hypersaw. So the first is Supersaw. I think what I'm hearing is almost the aliasing that you get from the JP, which kind of gives it that character. That sounds great. Let's say I just took the amplitude envelope and just kind of did a leady kind of thing with it. Now that's one thing I'm noticing when re-triggering it. The re-triggering is kind of odd. You do want it freely re-triggering. But it could also be just this thing I have. I don't know if you hear that. It's like it's almost phasing or something. That's a little odd, but I mean, it sounds really good. Let's check out you got the Hypersaw like the Electra. I would assume it's similar. Yeah, nice. When you're doing this, I'm not seeing a lot of drastic changes, which is kind of nice with the D2. Not a lot of changes in the frequency domain. Maybe up an octave. Yeah, I mean, it sounds good. Let's try the stereo Hypersaw. This is something we didn't have on Electra. I was really surprised about. I'm hearing something that I wasn't hearing here. It's like this beating sound almost. I don't know if you guys hear that, but that sounds weird. I think if I was going to use this, I would probably use it in the mono mode. But then you got that thing. So that's a little weird. That's a little strange. Maybe I'm doing something a little odd here. Let me take this MIDI pattern. I'm just so fascinated by this sound that I'm hearing. Okay, so this is pretty good. I mean, pretty good to the point I would definitely use it, but it has some of these what I would call danger zones, places where it doesn't quite work. So you got to be careful. But overall, I think it sounds really good. I mean, it does sound good. You just need to take some time dialing it in, but I mean, that is what it is. Moving on to NI Massive. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to be using these synths that didn't have per-oscillator Unison, but that is a classic, so we'll do it. So the way you do that here is we're going to go to voicing. We're going to turn this up maybe to 7 at first. And then we got to do pitch cutoff. And you can do pan as well. It's kind of ugly. It gives it this very old school digital sound that I think people would like. I wouldn't use it for my main like leads. Like I wouldn't use something like this for a lead like that. Oh, 4 is by default the one that we want to do. But that ugliness with the delay and reverb. Or maybe what I would use this for are those like big kind of shots, like those like a tech trancey kind of lead. It gives it an old school digital sound that I think I would like. I just wouldn't want it for my nice big lush saw leads. So it just goes to show, one, that delay and reverb really helps. and sometimes ugliness is good. So yeah, that's what it is. Moving on to Massive X, I was a little disappointed that Massive X doesn't have the same Unison features as Massive. Massive X is great. I used Massive, the original, a lot. But let's see what we can do. We can go over here, turn on Unison, and just bump up the voices. But the max we can do is 6. But it sounds a lot better. It sounds a lot better, for sure. And you get... Yeah, oh, it sounds so much better. You kind of want both Massive and Massive X. You kind of want one for the nasty, techie sounds, the really ugly ones. And then this one this is really lush. Wow. If I can find where the amplitude envelope is. I don't even know which one it is. Oh yeah, here it is. So we can just bump up the release. Oh, this is the decay. Pretty good. I wouldn't call it the best per se, but it's pretty solid, pretty lush. For 6 voices, it's pretty good. Yeah, I would say it's pretty solid. I mean, you could definitely use it. The one thing... Oh, it's not too bad on the CPU. Okay. Moving on, let's go to one of my favorites, Navira. Full-bodied, and look at that. They're doing the JP. So there's 2 modes, A and B. I believe A is the JP, and B is the Hypersaw from Virus. So this one does them both. Make sure all this stuff is off. I don't want... oh, that is off. To me, it just sounds good. It just sounds really good. Now, one thing that's really cool, you can do the JP algorithm, but you can do more voices. You can even duplicate the oscillator, so you can use the JP's oscillator with a double unison, which means it's going to have stereo width. I don't think the 4 is necessary. And then B is, of course, the version from the virus. So the real one to do is the 9. That's what the virus has. Even the Saw, it's like brighter with A. This is more like the virus, but of course you could. But of course you can also duplicate it. that's part of the reason the virus tends to sit a little bit better in the mix, because the saw may not be as bright. I think if I was using this, I'd use A. Really make those stand in front. And you can adjust the width. So I don't even know if you can get this thing anymore. This is from these guys in Russia, and they really knocked it out of the park with this. I'm impressed. This is like one of my favorites. That sounds really good. Moving on, let's go to Omnisphere. Now, Omnisphere, there's a couple ways you can do the Supersaw. I want to show you both of them. The first is just taking the synth, and, you know, this is that JP8080 Supersaw sound, and you can just do the Unison on here. So we can just bump up the number of voices to, this tells you the number of voices. And of course, you could just also just use a standard saw. Now it's interesting, these aren't as bright as what you would expect. I would expect just a normal sawtooth, like just like a... These aren't really as bright, although the JP saw it is what it is. There's also this, which I think is like the phase. It's just odd that they're not really... You don't really get that super bright saw. It's like you almost need to find it. That's kind of cool. You can just kind of choose whatever. The fat one. That's probably the most... I'm not actually hearing that bright part, but you can kind of see, this is called the Gibbs phenomena, where it has these like little edges there. I like the sound of this the best. This one would sound really good. The other thing you can do is you can take this, and we're going to turn off the Unison, and rather than use the synth, we're going to choose the JP8080, the actual Supersaw. Like, you can actually do this, which is kind of cool. So let's go ahead and do all, and you can actually choose as a... Under here, you can choose, for instance, the Roland JP8080. So we can just do the Supersaw. Quieter. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Oh man, I wish you could really pick. It's stereo too. That's really odd. I don't know what they did. Now you can't choose. You can't choose how detuned it is, but honestly, for dialing it in quick, sounds really good. Sounds pretty good. What I would want to then do is then just find the envelope. I I mainly use this as like a rompler. I don't really do that much programming with this, but you can probably see why. There we go. So the filter's off. So we could, of course, choose. Now, I'm not a fan of that lower note. It might just be because we're using samples. I'm not really sure why. And it's re-triggering the sample. So I wouldn't use this for everything, but it does sound really good on its own, but that's the problem with using samples. All right, moving on to phase plant. So you can, of course, we have all these different oscillators we can add here. I'm gonna click and just do, we'll start with analog. Turn on the Unison. Here it is. So you got different ones. Probably want to do something like this. Now, one thing I'm hearing, it's re-triggering the same way every time. So I think what you can do here is just increase this. Also turn on global unison. It has some artifacts, but it's pretty good. And then we can then go ahead and just play around with this. So I would say medium to medium-high artifacts, but it's not bad. I mean, it's a solid-sounding synth. That's how you would do it in phase plant. You can also, of course, choose the wavetable oscillator, which is pretty much the same thing. Just choose. Just be sure you set that phase randomization. So I'd say that sounds pretty good. I would definitely use it. I think it's you know, once again, this is just mega powerhouse synth. So asking it to do like a Supersaw is just a little overkill, but it is what it is. Let's move on to Arturia Pigments. This can do a lot of different things. For this, we bump up the unison voices here. We can do 7. Okay, this is weird. There's more artifacts in stereo mode. Than when it's not in stereo mode. I'd probably just use this. I'd probably just use a little bit of stereo. And then going over here. Where's my release curve? Oh, that's weird. So to me, this sounds good. There's something about it that sounds a little lifeless to me, but it's not bad. I think it's just solid. I think it would fit well in a mix. And the wavetable, it's a little different, so that's why I also pulled this up. You want to make sure the phase is retriggered. So that sounds pretty good, I would say. Pretty good. May not be my first choice, but it definitely will do the job. Let's move on to Rapid. Unison is here. Let's set it to 7 voices. So make sure we're actually randomizing the phase. Quite a bit of movement. Very digital sound. You get some of these digital kind of artifacts in here, but it's not as like wonky in the upper end that I'm listening to. It looks wonky, but it doesn't sound wonky. Is interesting. I think, yeah, this one's routed to volume. Give it a more kind of exponential slope. Definitely sounds to me like I'm seeing and hearing aliasing, which is part of that sound of the JP, so that's just a taste thing. It probably wouldn't be my first choice, but it's there. I mean, it can do it well. Move on to Serum. Nice full-bodied saw there. I mean, you got all the harmonics, so, you know, what can you say? And, okay, oscillator, we're on 2x oversampling. Let's go ahead and see what we can do. Bump up the Unison voices to 7. Now here you actually have to go under here to change the width, under the global. And you can actually change oops, didn't mean to do that. Whether you're doing super, linear, exponential. You can see how it spreads out the voices. I like this super mode. I really do. I think with the reverb. And let's say we just add a little bit of width. One thing I don't like too much, and I do like this sound a lot. There's one frequency you'll sometimes hear, and this is actually a common thing. It's like the second harmonic. Third. I guess this would be the second harmonic. Fundamental 2 harmonics. Sometimes you'd want to take that down. I find that can be just a little, I don't know, a little jarring. But luckily on here, you can just go in here and just... do that. Sorry, that's the phase. Oopsie. I can still hear it going, and it's there. That's better. That's much better. Okay. Sounds good. Let's move on to Spire. First thing to notice, full-bodied saw, but different. A little different looking. Let's bump the voice up to 7, and the detune. Now the thing about Spire is there's this density which controls whether it's the virus or the JP, and I don't remember which was which. Can hear that second harmonic ringing again too. It's a 7-voice thing. Sometimes I like it here in the middle. And for that reason, could also just be the headphones that I'm using too, but I don't know if you guys hear this. This is just so good. If you really want to hit him with it, use this multiband compressor. And of course you could sometimes you'll get this phasing sound, which can help just so I would say there are a lot of sweet spots here, but you still do need to take a little bit of time programming it in. But once you get it, it's going to sound really good. It's just it's not like VPS Avenger where you get one thing that you dial in. You got to pay attention. Like, that's good. Doesn't have the most lush sound, I would say, but it's very bright and in your face. Works well in a mix. This is one of my pretty much my go-to for leads. Let's see if I can make VSTi 2 really lush. Yeah. You're kind of getting that aliasing a little bit, I would say. Not as much there. Interesting. Interesting the way that works. I'll leave both of those there. If you're a Spire user, you can take a look. Moving on to Surge XT. The way we do this is just choose the number of voices. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, wow, you can go up to 16. 7 voices. So looking at this, I would say, oops, where's my master? There we go. Quite a bit of movement. Quite a bit of movement, so there's a lot of digital stuff going on. And this is amplitude. Weird. You can kind of adjust the curve. both smooth and very digital sounding, I would say. Moving on to Silent. This is a favorite of a lot of people. Bump up the voices to 7. And be sure to turn off the retrigger. Quite a bit of artifacts. I think in non-stereo mode, it sounds not that great. But in stereo mode, it's pretty good. Let's go ahead and make a little kind of... And you can add the EQ. I think the thing that sounds really good about Silent is its filter. I think its filter... But I think in terms of Unison, it's not as good as, say, Dune or Avenger or Spire, in my view. So there's Silent. Let's go to SynthMaster. This is SynthMaster 3. This is the alpha version. And let's start with 7 voices. Got to go to the voices page and make sure we are on free phase. Now, one thing to note about SynthMaster is it can be relatively difficult to dial in the Supersaw sounds. And I love SynthMaster, I really do. But it has a ton of artifacts. So one thing you can do is with this detune curve, just take some dialing in, I found. The other thing to note, if I take these voices down, it kind of rolls off. Maybe that's an anti-aliasing filter is my guess. But just be aware, it's not the brightest. I think if I was designing this synth, I'd make it so the volume of all of them would come down as you increase the voices. So once again, this sounds great once you dial it in. It just takes a little bit of coaxing to get that sound out. So be aware. Let's go ahead and bring, just to show you. So what I like is getting that initial click. So no attack, a little bit of decay. also spread the actual voices of each thing, which is kind of interesting. So once again, just remember, it's not the brightest. Of course, some of that can be fixed with EQ. You can also choose the engine quality. But I don't know. It doesn't change that anti-aliasing filter. So I have this on. But I think it sounds great. Once again, just took some time to dial it in. It's great. Moving on to Dimitri's synth Thron. This is through Plugin Alliance. Has a very distinct sound. Now, the one thing you're going to notice. Let's turn off this stuff. Even the default saw is going to be a little different. You don't have all the harmonics you can get. So even if you want to take the sawtooth, it doesn't have them all. Now you may not need it. Lower notes are going to be darker. Higher notes are going to be brighter, and that has nothing to do with the filters or anything like that. That is just what it is. Now, if we go ahead and increase the unison here. Wow. Sounds pretty good to me, just without anything else. You can add some stereo spread. And it's mainly because the sawtooth has its own unique character. That's what's giving it a different sound. Now, I don't think you can just load in anything you want. You kind of got to be careful. There's a few. So we got the phase being randomized from here. And of course you could go in here and tweak this to your heart's content. Maybe what you'd want to do is boost highs. Maybe not that much. Randomized phase. You almost just want to like draw a straight line. But you need it to be kind of exponential. So, you know, it's interesting the way that that works. You can, of course, load things around. You can import the frames. But it has its own unique sound, which is why I wanted to include it, just because it's so different. Moving on to Union. This is a synth by a company called Soundspot. they've replaced this with one called Wave OSC or Wave Oscillator. Surprisingly good, actually, for these kinds of sounds. It's mainly a lead synth, I would say. I purchased this, but I can't activate it anymore. Just because of the way it is. So the way we do this, you can, of course, open this up. A little weird. You have to do the unit. Now you can go up to 32 voices on here if you want, but let's do 7. Open this up and we can choose the detune. One thing that's cool, you can actually mid-side mix this, which is a different sound. Now this wave isn't the brightest saw at all. In the new version you get wave tables, so you can of course adjust them as you would like, and each one has its own filter. We can then even adjust and then what you just want to do is take the equalizer It's a very smooth sounding synth. It's not very snappy. So very interesting there. Alrighty, let's move on to Vanguard. This is a reboot of Refx's old school Vanguard. Very bright sound. Now the way you do this here, all you do is input the voices and then turn up the fat knob. Not your traditional Supersaw at all, which is why it's kind of cool to hear. One thing you can do, of course, is go to this amplitude envelope. I believe it's this one. So you don't get that standard way you may expect it to. So kind of cool. That's that sound. Moving on, we have Vital. You guys know I love Vital. Turn this off. Bump up the voices here. Start with 7. And under the advanced page, just like Serum, your Unison is here. Now, the thing about Vital, it just takes a little bit more tweaking. And here you can adjust the power, which I really like. It's right here. It's not as bright of a saw as you get from Serum. And you wonder if that's just, you know, that's the nature of how these things are calculated or what the deal is. Kind of interesting. You see them all there. But of course, you can add your favorites as well. Then go in here. And the main thing is this just needs a little bit of equalization, like a high shelf. Let's go ahead and just boost it. Really gentle gain. It just so happens that the oscillators aren't quite as bright, so sometimes you have to be a little artificial about it. One thing I sometimes do is add just a little bit of noise. Or it could just be the filter. That's what it is. That's what it was. There is Vital. Move on to Warlock. Another tone 2 synth, so it's going to have a very distinct sound. Let's go ahead under the Hypersaw mode. Let's start with, this has its own modes. 7x mono, this would be closest to the JP. Really metallic and really digital. I think you can really see the aliasing going on here. It has its sweet spots, but to me, there's something a little bit different about this versus something like Electra. I choose Supersaw. Fat tune clean. Oh. You can of course adjust. Yeah, there seems to be a lot more aliasing in the mono Hypersaw, but maybe that's because it's the mono Hypersaw. Let's try it in the stereo mode. Yeah, so this kind of has its own, it has its own character. To me, it's a little bit of an ugly sound. And maybe that's what people want. I mean, you compare that even to here, where we had the Supersaw. To, of course, Warlock. I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of it. Moving on to Zebra. Now Zebra, you get you get three options. You get single, you get quad, dual, sorry, quad, and 11. So with any of these, we just use. But with these, of course, you're going to be using 11. And this width controls how much stereo. Let's see what we see here. First thing to note is that it's not the brightest. There are ways you can do this, I think. Brilliance, things like this. For some reason, I like this more than Hive. I like the sound of this, and I don't know why. Maybe it's the same algorithm, and it's just easier for me to dial it in. Dial that in. Wow, that sounds pretty good. This is our amplitude envelope. Now, you hear this, but when it triggers the compressor, that's, sometimes that gives it that leady kind of sound. So you got negative and positive modulation on the detune. So what do you guys think? Which one's your favorite? Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you have any favorites, if there's other ones you want me to try. If I have them, I'll do my best to include them. I'll include a link to this project file in the description so you can go around and play with it yourself. Now, you need these synths as VSTs, so it'll only load the ones that you have, but if you're curious to see what I was doing and tweaking, you can just follow along with that project. And anyway, have a good one. See ya.